This is a special presentation of Farm Journal Television.
Today's farmers have high-tech equipment, from tractors to GPS to the hybrids, fighting for every bushel. Here to help is agronomist Ken Ferry.
There's definitely some things that we put into our systems pyramid.
And agronomist Missy Bauer.
So we're trying to create that true V trench.
And they're using the systems approach to higher yields on every acre. I'm Clinton Griffiths, and she's Margie Fisher. Together, we're Corn College TV.
Corn College TV, brought to you by Winfield, uncovering insights through data to help farmers be greater. Visit your local retailer or learn more at winfield.com. And by Micro Essentials, the next generation of fertilizer for the next generation of farming.
Ken, let's talk about the systems approach to selecting our varieties. It's not like there's just one choice out there every year.
Yeah, as we look at yield maps and all the data that comes in at the end of the year, you realize variety is probably the #1 choice farmers make to make the biggest difference. So what shows up in the yield map is the right variety selection, positioned on the right acres, the right farms, that type of thing. So it's not just a matter of picking the right hybrid, it's picking the right hybrid for the right farm, the right soil types, and then being able to rotate those genetics around so you don't put the same hybrid back to back. And that means it's a pretty high pressure job. Right. Trying to figure out what is the hybrid you're going to use out there. Now, I kind of compare it to buying a car. I don't like buying a new car. Sure. It's just too much hassle. But I do realize the more research that I do and the background of the automobiles that are out there and how they fit what I need to do, my driving capabilities, the better decision I'm going to make. If I go to the lot and just pick up whatever's the cheapest and go home, I can pay for that for a long time. So farmers the same way. They got to look at first performance, how that hybrid performs, but how it performs in plots within their area. Okay. They got to look at characteristics, meaning that is it something they want for their group farm? Are they looking at fixed and flex-geared hybrids? Are they looking at different events for insects, that type of thing? And how does it handle in their maturity range as far as, you know, is it something that is going to fit in their lineup that's going to work? And that just takes a lot of work. That takes a little research, knowing your seed min, working at a lot of data that's pertinent, that you know is good data from your own information. And then we really stress putting your own variety plot in. So you go out there and you actually see this hybrid perform. That's like test driving a car. I wouldn't buy a car without driving it around and test driving it and see what the feel was. Kind of the same way the hybrid. Put it in your own variety plot, put it under your own management, and then start selecting backwards from there to find out what it's going to be.
Okay, so you don't go first year this hybrid comes out, you're going to throw your entire farm in it. You're saying we want to test it first and make sure it gets tested.
We want to see the proof in the pudding, and we want to collect as much information we can. And I think that's where the seed industry can help these farmers quite a bit, because the more your seed reps know their product and how to position it, the more they can keep it from getting where it shouldn't be. Yeah, it may be the best yielding hybrid in this county in one every plot, but there's certain soil characteristics in that county that make it the go-to hybrid. When you bring it outside of that, it may not be. So, you know, a situation where it may not be one for a sandy soil, or it may not be one for an irrigated soil. So it's a solid fact-finding mission that you're going to go on. You're going to find performers, you're going to keep them in your lineup, and you're going to keep them in there until they're not sold anymore, or until they start telling you that it's time to move them out. But it is a tough job to do, but it's one that probably we should spend our most effort on.
All right, and we're going to see bushels at the end of the year by selecting the right hybrids and putting them in the right places.
Selecting the right hybrids, and not just looking for the highest yielding hybrid in the plot. What will be the best positioned on my farm in the end, and how does that help me in my harvest lineup, as well as scouting and planting and everything else.
All right, Missy, so we've selected our hybrid, but what else do we need to consider before we start putting these seeds in the ground?
Well, once we got that hybrid selected, we need to start thinking about the population. You know, what we've seen in some of our plots in the past is that there's certain hybrids that like maybe more population, and other hybrids that don't like as much. So, you know, the best place to start is with your seed company and what kind of their recommendation is. And of course, we still got to take into consideration soil type and those things that go along. But what we've set up here today is a demonstration trying to look at 2 different types of hybrids. One that in theory does like high population, and one that does not. And we've planted these at different populations, and we'll kind of follow this all the way through the season.
So it's not necessarily about soil type when it comes to population. Maybe more important to look at the hybrid you're using.
Yeah, it's really the combination of the two. You know, our soil type's still going to be important because it comes to water holding capacity. But within that water holding capacity, there's a huge component on the genetic side that we feel people need to maybe pay more attention to. So if you take a hybrid that doesn't like population and you really try to push that thing up, you know, 36, 37,000, it might really fall back.
Okay, okay. And so what do we have here?
What we have here is we've got two different hybrids. We have a hybrid, let's say A in the first row and B in this row. So we'll be able to look at these comparisons. This here is planted around 28,000 population. So looking at the low side of the population of typically where we'd be. And just for example here, I've got 2 foot a row measured out. And in this 2 foot a row, we've got 4 plants.
Right.
Okay. So that kind of shows you that individual spacing per plant, you know, is somewhere around that 7 to 8 inches apart in between each plant.
Right, and then back behind us we've got a higher population.
Yeah, behind us we'll take a look where we've got a population closer to 37, 38,000 plants per acre, and we'll see how that compares as far as how tight these are stacked in here.
Okay, well why don't we do this? Why don't we let this, this field grow up a little bit? We'll come back and take a look at the ears and see how these plants are affected.
Yeah, and that's really what we want to be after, is how do the ears respond to these different populations, and we should be able to see some nice differences in the ears based on hybrid characteristics and what they expected.
All right. Well, Missy, it's late summer now. We've had a few months to let these crops grow. We can see some big differences.
Yeah, where we run these two different hybrids amongst the different populations, what we have here is 28,000, 33,000, and 38,000 population.
Wow, big difference.
Yeah, and so one of our questions this spring was, will there be any difference in the ear set of how, let's say, hybrid A versus hybrid B handles the population? And you can see as we start stepping this up from the 28 to the 33 to the 38, this one hybrid doesn't look like it likes population very much.
Right.
So when we're starting to think about what population do we actually plant in our field, we need to think about what is the hybrid and what are the hybrid characteristics as far as what it likes for population. Because as you can see, if I ran too high of population with this hybrid, it could really hurt me as far as the overall yield goes.
Sure. Now what about differences in soil type? Do we see any differences there?
Yeah, we do, because this comes into the whole idea of maybe variable rate population. And if we take a look at these samples here, this is the same hybrid as what we have up here laying down here. And again, we go from 28 to 33 to 38,000. And you really notice the biggest difference when we get into this 38,000. This sample here is on a lighter soil type, where it has lower water holding capacity. This is where the ground turns a little bit more black, better water holding capacity, higher organic matter, higher CEC or exchange capacity. So you can see that if we're going to do variable rate population, when we're up here in this high ground or the light soils, we'd want to be maybe backed off down into here.
Okay.
But once we drop down into the low ground, then maybe now I can handle more population. So not only is population important within the hybrid, but also as we start to think about variable rate across these fields, I think there comes a lot of strength in understanding your hybrids and how they'll respond to these different populations. What's your number one takeaway for how you're going to manage your field next year? I think the number one takeaway is don't just assume that every hybrid should be planted at the same population. Because obviously you can see certain populations would allow us for a lot of opportunity. If I have 38,000 of these guys out there, right, I've got a lot of opportunity. But if I did that with this hybrid, I'd be really kicking myself. So making sure I pay attention to hybrid and get it matched up with what it can handle based on its characteristics. And then in the future, if you're not set up for variable rate, it'd be something to really look for as an opportunity to increase profitability and yields.
Over the generations, fertilizer, the unsung hero of the farm, has been in the background, quietly nourishing crops with very little fanfare. Until now. Meet the next generation of fertilizer, Micro Essentials.
There are 406 million acres of cropland in the U.S. Winfield is helping to make them work harder. Maybe the answer isn't a new product, but a new way of thinking. A way to turn data into something you can harvest, driving efficiency into every molecule. It's time to rethink what a business partner can be. It's time to be greater. Winfield.
Supercharge your P with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Studies show that when you add Avail to your fall-applied phosphorus, you can see an average increase of 9.9 bushels of corn per acre. Avail reduces phosphorus fixation to promote more efficient P uptake to the crop for stronger roots, better overall plant health, and higher yields. Supercharge your P this fall with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer to maximize the use of your fertilizer investment in the spring. Ask your fertilizer dealer for details today.
Ken, when we're talking about varieties and variety selection, it can get into some minutia, trying to figure out exactly what you need. But you say, take a look at the type of soil you have and help that determine what type of hybrid you want.
Right, it's all about, putting the right genetics in the right spot out there as you're working through it. And here today we'll talk about one area in genetics, and that is managing water and light interception. So those are two big important things, of course, in yield. But when we're talking about water and light interception, we're going to separate our soils out into what we call the droughtier soils. As we are here today, we're out of water, and this is a very dry situation that we're into. And this soil needs to be protected because that's its wrap. It just doesn't have very good water holding capacity. So as I'm trying to select a program for this, as we've done here today, we've narrowed these rows up. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to canopy that ground and try to keep the evaporation rate low and try to keep most of the water going through here, the loss to be through transpiration through the plant. So from a genetic standpoint, I'm going to look for, in this situation, I'm going to look for a more pendulum leaf hybrid, a kind of a leafy hybrid that tends to put its leaves out to the middle of the row to intercept sunlight and to keep it from hitting the ground. Where if I'm in a soil that has a lot of water holding capacity, water is not my limiting factor, and I want to push populations, and if I'm going to crowd things, then I want more of an upright leaf structure. I'm going to try to get the light down into the canopy and harvest as much as I can. So I'm trying to harvest more sunlight and turn it into food. So an upright structure is where we're after when we're pushing things. A more pendulum leaf type of ground protection is where we're at when we're pulling those populations back due to light soils, and we're trying to save water. So they're two different approaches. Today in this droughty field, we have an upright structured plant out here. The genetics in this hybrid are upright, so the leaves tend to go straight up. And you can tell, as hot as it is today, this thing is rolled up pretty tight. She's trying to protect itself because so much sunlight's getting down in the canopy that it's raised the temperature in the canopy, and this plant is quick to roll, quick to respond. Okay, so this is it's a different hybrid here, and this is what we call a more pendulum leaf hybrid. So the leaf structure tends to come out in the row, a little bit broader leaf. It's a leafier hybrid. And it's coming out, so everything comes out, it's not so upright. And this would be kind of a hybrid class or selection you would look at if you're trying to manage water, you're trying to save water. So a situation where this is going to be a hybrid that'll work better for you in droughtier soils, droughtier conditions. But if I take this hybrid and I put it into heavy soils and I push populations, due to its leaf structure, it can be more of a challenge to manage disease because I can't get sunlight deeper in the canopy to dry things out. So I stay wet down in here and I would fight disease pressure. The upright hybrid will let sunlight down in and dry out a little bit better, so you can push those populations. So again, it's no doubt you still got to work off genetics. So if I pick a pendulum leaf hybrid for this droughtier soil, but it's a poor hybrid in general, then no matter what I do with the upright, if it's a good hybrid, it's going to beat it. But if you're looking at equal hybrids and you're looking at where do I put this leafy hybrid? Now, a lot of the genetics here in the heartland of Illinois are more bred to the upright. So situation, you have to look maybe a little bit further in your genetic package to find a leafier type hybrid like that they would grow in drier land soils, that type of thing. But the situation, just leaf structure alone can make a big difference in how we manage water and sunlight in the canopy.
Yeah, especially in the type of conditions we're seeing today.
Right. So we can see If we look down the row here, we can see some of the subtle differences today. Things are pretty tough for this crop, meaning if it doesn't rain, it probably isn't going to make that much difference. But we can see some subtle differences in how much sunlight is hitting the ground, even today, as tough as things are rolled up between these two hybrids.
Definitely. Thanks, Ken.
Corn College TV, brought to you by Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Supercharge your phosphorus this fall with Avail to maximize the use of your fertilizer investment in the spring.
You don't just see a field. You see the future of your operation. One we're helping you protect. Enlist is a new herbicide-tolerant trait system that will build on glyphosate, improving performance to move farming ahead.
Rust is destroying your valuable equipment and property. Rust Guy permanently stops rust the easy way. No scraping, grinding, or sandblasting. Brush, spray, or roll Rust Guy onto any rusted metal and it will not rust again. Rust Guy is not a paint, but an industrial-strength formula that permanently stops rust. It leaves a slick, rock-hard finish that can be left as is or painted. Rust Guy protects from salt, manure, fertilizer, urine, and rain. Call 888-RUST-GUY to talk to a rust expert or go to rustguy.com.
Hey, what's going on?
Just checking the fields. Yours are looking pretty good. Must be doing something right.
Actually, I got a guy.
You got a guy?
Well, it's not just any guy. I got a Channel seedsman.
Channel, yeah?
Yeah, I've been working with him pretty close to get, well, you can see for yourself. This is what I'd recommend. Let's get to work. Now this is what you want to see.
Maybe I should get a guy.
Maybe you should get a Channel seedsman.
Find your Channel seedsman at channel.com.
Missy, when we're selecting variety, one of the things that comes into play is relative maturity by variety. Let's start by talking about what that means when we're putting these out in the field.
What we're looking at, and we have some examples here too, of looking at that relative maturity. Some things we want to think about is not only how many day it is. So here we have a 92-day relative maturity. Here we have 111.
Right.
So obviously this is a much shorter season. It's going to get to its final maturity sooner than what we'd have with this 111 day.
And why do you decide on what's to select one variety versus the other?
Well, part of it's in your geography. So, you know, we would be a little nervous about this 111 day if we're real far up into Michigan or Wisconsin or Minnesota, something like that. We'd worry about, is it going to finish before we get a freeze? So then maybe we're looking at maybe a little shorter day type of a hybrid. On the other hand, if we're in an area that we can handle the longer season, it gives us that much more time for good fill and potentially, in theory, higher yields.
Right.
So we like to spread out our risk on our farm is one of the important things. So we'd hate to go out and plant all 110 or 111 day on our farm because a lot of times it could all come into the maybe bad heat or bad stress during pollination at the same time.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more and how heat and stress during the summer plays into what we end up with our ears.
Well, what we want to think about is spreading out our risk enough that if we've got the number of heat units until we get to flowering. So we need to pay attention to that as well. So track your heat units to flowering, and all that's in your seed guide as far as that information. But we have a really good example of it here. This is our 92-day hybrid, and you can see that it actually pollinated very well. It's filled out very well to the tip. We have very little kernel abortion here. So this is a pretty good, nice filled out ear here. Then as we move and we get into, in this case, a 98-day, in this case, a 104-day, one of the things that we notice is that these ears aren't filled out as much. We've got some kernel abortion here as well as in here. What's happened in this situation was we got into the worst of our heat and drought in 2012 as we did. These were at the most susceptible stages for kernel abortion to happen. This one had gotten through before we got too bad in our heat and drought stress. Okay. So it was already sailing through before we got into the ugly period. Once it got into the ugly period, it was already had its yield protected. Okay. These were not the case there. And then as we move into this one, this 111-day, again, by the time it got into the critical period, the weather had turned around and got cooler and we had gotten some moisture back. So considering the timing of stress based on this really affects the yield. It doesn't mean that this is a bad yielding hybrid, it just hit the timing wrong.
Right, and so spreading that risk out so it doesn't all happen that same week that we get 107 temperatures is going to make a big difference.
Exactly, that's the best way to kind of weatherproof this on your farm.
Yeah, and what about the quality of the stock? Can we see differences in that, in the stock quality by relative maturity?
Yeah, and sometimes it's hybrid by hybrid specific. So here's an example, and what do we mean by stalk quality? We're taking this plant here, and we're actually splitting the stalk open. We want to do that and get about halfway right in the middle as far as the width of the stalk itself. What we're looking for is what we call cannibalization of the stalk. So that's where it turns to real this kind of, I call it the styrofoamy look.
Sure.
As we go to fill the ear on here, we start to move nutrients from the upper part as well as this lower part to put all the effort into the ear. So as that happens, we cannibalize this stalk. What we want to see is as we progress through the season that we still have the bottom part of the stalk, what we call clean. So if you take a close look in here, this doesn't have this kind of styrofoamy or pith look to it. This is still pretty good, a lot of juices in here yet. This protects the plant from diseases as well as helps for the standability. But what we notice is not necessarily just based on maturity of this hybrid, is more just the hybrid itself and how it handles the stress. So this one looks pretty decent where we got the bottom couple nodes that are clean.
Sure.
If we look at this example here, we can see that we have very poor stalk quality and this stalk's already starting to break down on us. So I'd be very nervous come harvest time, is this one still going to be standing for me or not?
Absolutely.
So maybe now I start to adjust my harvest order. Okay? Even though this was a 92-day and is going to be mature sooner, maybe this 90, in this case the 98-day here, might need harvested first because it might not stand for very long.
Right, right.
So that's how we try to utilize what we have going on in stalk quality and, you know, think about our harvest order when we actually harvest things.
You don't just see a field. You see the future of your operation. One we're helping you protect. Enlist is a new herbicide-tolerant trait system that will build on glyphosate, improving performance to move farming ahead.
There are 406 million acres of cropland in the U.S. Winfield is helping to make them work harder. Maybe the answer isn't a new product, but a new way of thinking. A way to turn data into something you can harvest, driving efficiency into every molecule. It's time to rethink what a business partner can be. It's time to be greater. Winfield.
Hey, what's going on?
Just checking the fields. Yours are looking pretty good. Must be doing something right.
Actually, I got a guy.
You got a guy?
Well, it's not just any guy. I got a channel seedsman.
Channel, yeah?
Yeah, I've been working with him pretty close to get, well, you can see for yourself. This is what I'd recommend. Let's get to work. Now, this is what you want to see.
Maybe I should get a guy.
Maybe you should get a channel seedsman.
Find your channel seedsman at channel.com.
When we're scouting our corn in the season, we want to make sure one critical time is pollination. So you want to make sure we get this pollinated. You want to be watching for silk clippers. So this example here where we can see some of these silks have been clipped. So if you have a lot of that, before we get this ear pollinated, then we'd want to be taking care of that as far as applying an insecticide. If we don't have at least a ½ inch of silk present at all times, we'll have difficulty actually pollinating this ear. After we get through pollination, we still want to continue scouting our corn. We can have late season pests, for example, that we have here with spider mites. So this is some earlier pressure of spider mites where we can see the speckling in here. And this is as it gets very advanced, you can see the effect that it has on these leaves as it really pulls a lot of the nutrients out of these leaves itself. So if this gets up from where the ear leaf is at and above, we're really going to struggle with good yields as far as when we go to fill the ears. So that's something that we need to continue through that milk stage and on into dough, and even into dent, we still want to be protecting this. One other thing that we'll have late in the season that we actually want to protect all the way through dent and into black till we get to black layer is some of the earworms that we can have, or western bean cutworms that we can have actually doing damage to the ears themselves where they're going in and eating the kernels. So we actually need to scout corn all the way through the growing season. I like to keep an eye on it until we get to that black layer.